Among history's most remarkable figures, two women stand whose strength and legacy still echo across centuries. Josepha of Saxony and Princess Helena of the United Kingdom. Each shaped royal dynasties in turbulent times, guided by devotion, diplomacy, and personal sacrifice. Let us begin with the first, Josepha of Saxony. Josepha of Saxony was born on the 4th of November in the year 1731 at Dresden Castle in Saxony. What made this young princess from Saxony rise to become the heart of the French royal family? How did her quiet strength help mend the rift between kings and their heirs? And why does her name remain largely forgotten, even though she bore not one but 3 future kings of France? Please watch my full video until the end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please make sure to share it with your friends. Thank you. Now, let us dive into the full story. Born into the powerful Wettin family, Josepha was the 9th child of Augustus III, King of Poland and Elector of Saxony, and his wife, Josepha of Austria. Surrounded by royal tradition and religious piety, her early life was filled with formality, etiquette, and strong Catholic values. Her family's political ambitions ran deep, and in a Europe constantly shifting between wars and alliances, every daughter had a role to play. Josepha's destiny would not lie in Poland or Saxony, but across the Rhine in France. She was quietly prepared for life at court, mastering diplomacy from an early age. What no one knew then was that this gentle Saxon girl would soon be thrust into the heart of Versailles, becoming the mother of kings and a cornerstone of France's future. By the mid-1740s, the French royal court was in a delicate position. The young Dauphin Louis, heir to the throne, had recently lost his Spanish wife, Infanta Maria Theresa, during childbirth. The court mourned her deeply, but the pressing matter of securing the Bourbon line demanded action. A new bride had to be found, one who could heal political wounds and build alliances across borders. Josepha of Saxony, though just a teenager, was quietly put forward as a potential bride. The suggestion came from her influential uncle, Maurice de Saxe, a respected military leader. For King Louis XV and his mistress, Madame de Pompadour, the match offered more than beauty or charm, it promised diplomacy. Saxony and France had recently been on opposite sides during the War of the Austrian Succession. A marriage between the Saxon princess and the French heir could mend those fractured ties. Yet, there was one problem. Josepha's father had once deposed the father of Queen Maria Leszczyńska, who still held her place as France's queen. It was a source of humiliation for the queen and made the proposed union tense at best. But politics often wins over personal pride at court. Despite initial objections, the engagement was approved. Quietly and without much fanfare, preparations began to bring this young Saxon girl into the heart of France, not just as a bride, but as a future mother to generations of French rulers. On the 9th of February in the year 1747, Josepha of Saxony officially became the Dauphine of France. Just 15 years old, she entered Versailles not only as a bride, but as a foreigner stepping into one of Europe's most complicated royal courts. The weight of expectations was immense. She had to earn the favor of a grieving husband, a powerful king, a reserved queen, and a watchful court. Her first test came almost immediately. Royal tradition required that the new Dauphine wear a bracelet bearing a portrait of her own father. But instead, Josepha wore one that featured the Queen's father, a diplomatic gesture that deeply touched Queen Maria Leszczyńska. This small act of humility and respect helped heal old wounds and set the tone for their future relationship. The court, too, took notice of her cleverness. The Dauphine quickly won over her father-in-law, King Louis XV. Though known for his indulgences, he respected Maria Josepha's modesty and religious devotion. Even Madame de Pompadour, the king's controversial mistress, found an ally in her. Maria Josepha never openly criticized the royal favorite, a wise move that earned her continued support behind the scenes. In a court driven by ambition and gossip, the young Dauphine's calm and respectful approach was refreshing. She didn't seek attention, she earned it through patience and kindness. Versailles had seen many foreign princesses come and go, but Maria Josepha had arrived to stay. Life at Versailles was a delicate balancing act. Maria Josepha had to navigate not only her husband's grief, but also the complex relationships that defined court politics. One of the most challenging was with Queen Maria Leszczyńska. Though the queen had initially opposed her marriage to the Dauphin, Maria Josepha approached her with consistent grace and humility. Over time, what began as an awkward tension softened into mutual respect, and eventually, quiet friendship. Still, their bond remained measured. The queen, known for her simplicity and strong morals, preferred a life away from politics. Maria Josepha, equally devout, found comfort in that distance. But while she stayed respectfully in the queen's shadow, she built a meaningful alliance with someone else far more controversial, Madame de Pompadour. The king's mistress held undeniable power. Unlike many others at court, Maria Josepha never openly condemned her. Instead, she acknowledged Madame de Pompadour's role in securing her marriage and maintained a polite, even warm rapport with her. This shrewd diplomacy won her valuable allies and protected her from the venomous intrigues that brought down so many others. Even King Louis XV, a man rarely moved by courtly subtleties, grew fond of his daughter-in-law. He admired her quiet dignity, her faith, and the stabilizing presence she offered in a palace often torn by scandal. Maria Josepha was no queen in title, but her influence reached deep into the heart of royal power, thanks to the balance she maintained between piety, politics, and personal restraint. Though her marriage began with political formality, Maria Josepha's bond with the Dauphin slowly grew into genuine affection. Dauphin Louis was still haunted by the loss of his first wife, and his mourning had cast a long shadow over the royal household. At first, he remained distant, his sorrow still fresh and visible to all. But Maria Josepha's gentle patience and unwavering kindness gradually softened his grief. Bit by bit, she won his heart, not through grand gestures, but with quiet resilience. Their private life stood in contrast to the grandeur of Versailles. The couple preferred the solitude of their own apartments to the lavish spectacles of court. They shared a love of prayer, routine, and introspection, unusual qualities for the French royal court, where excess was the norm. Both devout Catholics, they bonded over their faith, and their home became a space of calm, away from the palace's endless distractions. Tragedy, however, was never far behind. The Dauphin's only child from his first marriage died in early 1748, deepening his sadness once again. Maria Josepha responded not with jealousy, but with compassion, even commissioning a portrait of the little girl to be placed above her cradle as a sign of remembrance. Maria Josepha had not only become a wife, but also a healer of grief, of political rifts, and of emotional scars. In a world that demanded strength wrapped in grace, she stood firm. Her early years in marriage laid the foundation for the quiet power she would wield in years to come, not just as consort, but as a mother of kings. The Dauphin's grief was not something easily silenced by time or duty. Though Maria Josepha had grown close to him, Louis remained prone to periods of deep sadness, especially following the loss of his only daughter from his first marriage. In April of 1748, when the child passed away at just 2 years old, it reopened emotional wounds that had barely begun to heal. This was a husband torn between memory and hope, and a wife determined to stay by his side. Maria Josepha responded not with frustration, but with a quiet strength that made her invaluable. Rather than distance herself from her husband's sorrow, she embraced it. She honored the memory of his lost daughter, treated the late Infanta with respect, and offered constant, comforting companionship to her husband. Even in her private rooms, she kept tokens and portraits of the Dauphin's past, a gesture that demonstrated her understanding of his pain. Her presence brought calm. Their shared faith offered grounding, and their bond grew stronger through shared grief. While Louis was a reserved man, Maria Josepha's emotional patience allowed him to feel safe again, not just as a husband, but as a father looking forward. It was during these years that their family quietly expanded, and though not all of their children would survive, their marriage was strengthened by the life they were building together. In a court defined by appearances, Maria Josepha and the Dauphin had forged something real, a partnership marked by trust, compassion, and the enduring grace of a deeply loyal wife. Behind the golden walls of Versailles, where entertainment reigned and politics buzzed, Maria Josepha and the Dauphin carved out a quieter existence. Their household became known not for revelry, but for its devotion to faith, to family, and to one another. The couple, deeply religious by nature, often withdrew from the lavish festivities that defined court life. Instead, they spent most of their time in their private apartments, which overlooked the peaceful orangery gardens. Maria Josepha's strong Catholic beliefs shaped her daily routines. She maintained a disciplined schedule of prayer, charity, and service, often encouraging her children and staff to do the same. Her influence was felt not through royal commands, but through the calm stability she created within her home. While Versailles around her danced with gossip and distraction, Maria Josepha built a haven of moral clarity. The Dauphin, too, felt safest in this serene environment. He was part of the devots, a group of pious men who believed in a more spiritual and disciplined court. With Maria Josepha's support, he found both comfort and conviction. Together, they resisted the hedonism that characterized Louis XV's court and focused instead on building a family rooted in tradition and dignity. Though they lived in the same palace, the Dauphin and Dauphine stood apart from the noise of Versailles. Their devotion was not performative, it was deeply personal. And within those walls, Maria Josepha shaped a new model of royal womanhood, one grounded not in power or pageantry, but in unwavering faith and family loyalty. Maria Josepha's legacy would be etched not only in her conduct, but in her children, a generation that would forever alter the course of French history. Between 1748 and 1764, she gave birth to many children, though heartbreak followed closely behind. Several were stillborn or died in infancy, including her first 2 sons and a daughter. Yet amid the sorrow, there were surviving children, and among them were future kings. Her first living daughter, Marie Zéphirine, was born in 1750. Though her life was brief, the joy she brought to her parents was profound. The child passed away at just 5 years old, adding to the deep well of grief Maria Josepha already carried. In 1751, she gave birth to Louis Joseph, Duke of Burgundy, a bright and promising boy who became the focus of her hopes. He too died young in 1761 from tuberculosis. But fate would grant Maria Josepha 3 sons who would live to adulthood and wear France's crown, Louis Auguste, who would become Louis XVI, Louis Stanislas, the future Louis XVIII, and Charles Philippe, who reigned as Charles X. She also had a daughter, Clotilde, who became Queen of Sardinia, and another daughter, Elizabeth, who remained unmarried and was tragically executed during the French Revolution. Maria Josepha was a devoted mother, though she openly favored her eldest son, the Duke of Burgundy. Still, her nurturing influence shaped all her children. She taught them faith, restraint, and duty, values that would be tested in the storm that followed her passing. Through her offspring, Maria Josepha became the quiet architect of France's final generation of Bourbon kings. While others at Versailles pursued power through politics or pleasure, Maria Josepha remained grounded in her deep religious convictions. Her faith was not simply ceremonial, it was the guiding principle of her life. Together with her husband and mother-in-law, Queen Maria Leszczyńska, she formed a quiet but firm counterbalance to the libertine excesses of King Louis XV's court. Their private circle became known for its piety, simplicity, and moral order. Maria Josepha rarely intervened in state matters, but when she did, it was with purpose. Her influence was subtle, never confrontational or forceful, yet it carried weight among those who valued tradition. She supported the devots, the same religious faction to which her husband belonged. These conservative nobles and clerics hoped to restore religious and moral authority at the heart of the monarchy, especially as France drifted towards secularism and scandal. One rare instance of political involvement came in 1762, when she attempted to save the Society of Jesus from suppression in France. The Jesuits, long defenders of Catholic teaching and loyal supporters of royal authority, had fallen out of favor with certain legal factions and Enlightenment thinkers. Maria Josepha's intervention failed, but her effort reflected her commitment to faith over fashion. Unlike many at court, Maria Josepha's strength came not from manipulation, but from moral clarity. She offered a vision of royalty rooted in responsibility and devotion, a stark contrast to the indulgent world around her. In doing so, she quietly preserved a sense of dignity within the fading grandeur of the Bourbon court. In 1756, Maria Josepha's world was shaken when her native Saxony was invaded by Frederick II of Prussia, igniting the 7 Years' War. Though she remained in France, the attack on her homeland affected her deeply. For Maria Josepha, it was not just a political event, it was a personal wound. Her family's security and legacy were suddenly under threat, and she could do little from the gilded halls of Versailles. Despite this turmoil, Maria Josepha remained outwardly composed. Her role at court had always been defined by restraint, and during these years of conflict, she became even more reserved. Though many urged her to use her influence to sway French involvement in the war, she stayed silent. Her loyalty was divided between her Saxon blood and her adopted French crown. To speak too strongly in either direction would have been dangerous. That same year marked the beginning of a different kind of battle, one between tradition and reform. In 1762, the Parliament of Paris, influenced by Jansenist magistrates, moved to suppress the Society of Jesus. Maria Josepha, a strong supporter of the Jesuits, made a quiet appeal for their preservation. Her efforts were in vain. The king, though sympathetic, allowed the suppression to proceed. Through war and religious tension, Maria Josepha remained what she had always been, a princess of quiet conviction. She chose faith over power, reflection over reaction. In a palace filled with spectacle, she stood apart, not through absence, but through the silent strength of a woman who knew when to speak and when not to. By the early 1760s, Maria Josepha's world began to narrow. Though she had once been the gentle center of a growing royal family, loss now crept into every corner of her life. Her most painful heartbreak came with the death of her beloved son, Louis Joseph, Duke of Burgundy, in March of 1761. He had been her pride, intelligent, devout, and destined to inherit the throne. At just 9 years old, he succumbed to extrapulmonary tuberculosis, a slow and cruel illness that left his mother devastated. This loss left a hole in Maria Josepha's heart that nothing could fill. Though she had other children, none held quite the same place. The Dauphin, also broken by their son's death, became even more reclusive. Together, husband and wife found solace only in mourning. Versailles, with all its shimmering beauty, became a palace of ghosts for them. Even amid this grief, Maria Josepha remained committed to her surviving children. She poured her attention into their spiritual and personal development, especially her second surviving son, Louis Auguste, the boy who would one day become Louis XVI. But even as she worked to guide him, her own strength was quietly waning. She had once commissioned portraits of her lost children, placing them gently throughout her chambers, small, silent tributes to lives cut short. For Maria Josepha, motherhood was both her greatest gift and deepest sorrow. The court around her may have returned to its laughter and intrigue, but she remained wrapped in remembrance, a mother grieving in silence, even as history moved relentlessly forward. On the 20th of December in the year 1765, Maria Josepha's world collapsed with the death of her husband, Dauphin Louis. His passing was more than the loss of a spouse. It was the end of her emotional anchor, her closest companion in faith, sorrow, and quiet strength. The blow struck deeply, and unlike earlier tragedies, Maria Josepha could not recover. She descended into a long, consuming grief that left even the courtiers uneasy. According to accounts from the time, she refused to eat properly, withdrew from nearly all social interaction, and surrounded herself with reminders of her husband. Portraits of the Dauphin were placed throughout her private chambers, including one above her bed, painted to show him pale and near death, beneath draped gray mourning cloth. Her apartments, once a space of serene order, became a shrine of sorrow. In public, she followed all courtly mourning rituals. Draperies were changed, rooms converted into spaces of formal condolence, and her daughters received visitors dressed in black beneath a canopy of grief. But behind these rituals, the widow's sorrow grew heavier. Henriette Campan, a later witness to court life, recalled how Maria Josepha's despair became so extreme that many believed it was not just love lost, but the future she had imagined vanished forever. Even King Louis XV, typically aloof, responded with compassion. He ordered her moved from the rooms she had shared with his son to those once held by Madame de Pompadour, hoping the change would ease her suffering. But nothing could replace the bond she had lost. The once composed Dauphine had become a ghost of herself, clinging to memories, drifting through court as a woman whose heart had broken beyond repair. As Versailles continued to shine outwardly, Maria Josepha's inner world faded further. Once a beloved figure in the royal household, she now moved quietly through the palace, a woman wrapped in memory and mourning. The vibrant court around her seemed increasingly distant, filled with new faces and shifting alliances. The world she had helped stabilize was changing, and she no longer felt part of its rhythm. King Louis XV, aware of her fragile state, offered her gentle courtesies. He moved her into the former apartments of Madame de Pompadour, hoping to provide comfort. There, Maria Josepha received the king more often, and their conversations turned to the future of France, especially the impending marriage of her son, the new Dauphin. She opposed the idea of him marrying an Austrian archduchess, a decision she felt betrayed her mother's legacy. Yet, as always, her protest was quiet, thoughtful, and ultimately ignored. Though no longer at the center of royal politics, Maria Josepha remained a moral compass to those closest to her. Her children still looked to her for guidance. The staff around her spoke of her kindness and humility. But in truth, she had grown tired. Her health was declining, and her spirit had never fully recovered from her husband's death. In her final months, Maria Josepha spent more time in solitude, walking the quieter paths of Versailles, clinging to her rosary and seeking the peace that life had denied her. The court moved on, but she stayed still, caught between memory and fading duty, waiting for the end with grace, silence, and prayer. Though Maria Josepha never became queen, her influence endured in ways that reshaped France forever. She was the mother of 3 future kings, Louis XVI, Louis XVIII, and Charles X, a legacy unmatched by any other French consort. Through them, her values, her piety, and her quiet strength echoed far beyond her own lifetime, even as the monarchy itself trembled on the brink of collapse. She had raised her sons in an atmosphere of religious devotion and humility. Though each would walk a very different path, all were shaped by the foundation she built, one of duty, modesty, and unwavering belief in divine order. Her daughter Clotilde became Queen of Sardinia, while her youngest, Elizabeth, remained unmarried and devoted to her faith, ultimately dying during the Revolution for her loyalty to the crown. Historians often overlook Maria Josepha, focusing instead on the grander figures of her time. But the stability she offered during a chaotic period in French history was no small achievement. Her restraint softened the edges of royal indulgence. Her diplomacy healed wounds both within the court and beyond it. And her children carried her moral legacy into an age where thrones would be tested, toppled, and remembered. Even in her absence from the spotlight, Maria Josepha's shadow stretched across Europe. She may not have held a scepter, but she shaped sovereigns. Her quiet grace, once hidden behind Versailles' glittering walls, became a silent force, one that prepared a troubled kingdom for the storms ahead, even if it could not prevent them. Maria Josepha's final months were marked by a quiet, sorrowful decline. Isolated within the opulent walls of Versailles, her once resilient spirit had been worn down by loss, grief, and the relentless weight of duty. Her health deteriorated rapidly, likely worsened by the long emotional toll of living beside a consumptive husband and burying many of her children. She withdrew more from public life, speaking little, praying often, and awaiting peace that Versailles could no longer offer her. On the 13th of March in the year 1767, Maria Josepha of Saxony passed away at the Palace of Versailles. She was just 35 years old. Her cause of death was tuberculosis, the same illness that had claimed her son Louis Joseph and shadowed her husband's final days. Her passing sent ripples through the court, though not the grand spectacle reserved for reigning royalty. Still, those who knew her spoke of her gentleness, her unshakable faith, and her quiet courage. She was buried on the 22nd of March at the Cathedral of Saint-Étienne in Sens, far from the dazzling crowds of Paris, in a place suited to her calm and devout spirit. Few remembered her with fanfare, but many remembered her kindness. The young Saxon princess who had once crossed into France to marry a grieving prince had left behind not only a royal family, but the soul of a vanished court. Her memory lived on in her children, in her silent sacrifices, and in the unwavering love she gave without condition. Maria Josepha may have died quietly, but her legacy endured, stitched into the bloodline of kings, and whispered in the halls she once walked with grace. Let us now turn to another remarkable figure of royal descent. Princess Helena of the United Kingdom was born on the 25th of May in the year 1846 at Buckingham Palace in London, England. How did this fifth daughter of Queen Victoria find her voice in a crowded court of duty, tradition, and towering expectations? What made Helena's path, lined with nursing, service, and controversy, so distinct from her siblings? And why did her sense of purpose endure long after the crown's spotlight had faded? From the moment of her birth, Princess Helena was wrapped in royal expectations. As the third daughter and fifth child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, her early life was shaped by discipline, education, and the quiet strength of her German father. She was baptized Helena Augusta Victoria, a name that echoed both her maternal grandmother and the royal heritage of her lineage. Growing up in the company of her many siblings, Helena quickly became known for her practicality and helpful nature. While her older sisters were drawn to artistic pursuits or political marriages, Helena showed an early interest in hands-on work, particularly in caregiving, embroidery, and later, nursing. Her father, Prince Albert, encouraged all his daughters to be intellectually engaged and morally grounded, and Helena took these lessons deeply to heart. Yet even in her formative years, Helena faced the constant tension between personal passion and public duty. As a daughter of Britain's reigning monarch, her future would be shaped not only by love or ambition, but by the needs of a growing empire and the ever-watchful eyes of her mother, Queen Victoria. Helena's childhood was one of privilege, routine, and carefully structured affection. Alongside her siblings, including the future King Edward VII and Princess Alice. She grew up between the royal residences of Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and most fondly, Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. Osborne was her father's creation, a coastal retreat where the royal children could enjoy simpler lives, far from the glare of London society. There, Helena thrived under a regimen of early morning lessons, daily walks, and family dinners where even Queen Victoria insisted on punctuality and perfect manners. Prince Albert took a keen interest in the education of all his children. He believed that royal birth should not preclude intellectual depth, and he personally oversaw their schooling, especially in languages, history, and moral philosophy. Helena, practical and curious, was especially close to her sister Louise. The two often explored the grounds together, taking interest in sketching, nature, and domestic crafts. Unlike some of her more rebellious siblings, Helena was seen as dependable, a trait her mother valued deeply. Queen Victoria often called her Ländchen, a German nickname reflecting her husband's roots and their bilingual household. But beneath the order and affection lay the strict discipline of the Victorian court. Emotional expression was often restrained. Duty came first. Even as a child, Helena began to understand that her desires for independence, for personal interests, would always be balanced against the needs of her family and country. In those early years at Osborne and Windsor, a quiet foundation was laid for a lifetime of service, modesty, and steady resolve. As Helena entered her teenage years, the world around her changed dramatically. In December of 1861, when she was just 15 years old, her beloved father, Prince Albert, died suddenly of typhoid fever. His death devastated Queen Victoria and cast a heavy shadow over the entire royal household. For Helena, it marked the end of childhood and the beginning of a life centered on supporting her grieving mother. In the months following Prince Albert's death, Helena became one of Queen Victoria's most loyal and dependable companions. She helped manage the Queen's household, assisted in correspondence, and accompanied her on daily walks. While her elder siblings prepared for marriages or state roles, Helena remained by her mother's side, filling the emotional and practical void left by her father's absence. This early immersion into royal responsibility left little room for Helena's personal ambitions. Yet she carried her new role with quiet strength. Unlike her more publicly active siblings, Helena's service was often behind the scenes, steady, loyal, and deeply valued by the Queen. Her willingness to take on these burdens made her a constant presence in Victoria's life and earned her a reputation for maturity beyond her years. Even as a teenager, Helena began to embody the role she would carry throughout her life, the dutiful daughter, the quiet supporter, the practical royal. Her journey into adulthood would not be driven by fame or glory. but by loyalty, sacrifice, and a deep sense of familial and national obligation. Helena may have been known for her loyalty and devotion, but beneath her reserved royal exterior was a progressive spirit, one especially drawn to medicine and practical skills. During her late teens and early 20s, she developed a deep interest in nursing, medical care, and needlework. These were not simply genteel pastimes for a princess. For Helena, they were meaningful paths to public service. Inspired by the work of Florence Nightingale and the rising visibility of trained nurses after the Crimean War, Helena sought to understand and support this emerging profession. She read widely, met with medical professionals, and eventually became a powerful advocate for nurse education and reform. Her involvement was not ceremonial. She studied techniques, attended meetings, and pushed for higher standards in what had long been dismissed as unskilled labor. At the same time, Helena's skill in needlework became more than a domestic hobby. It was a form of art, discipline, and charity. She supported causes that provided employment for women through sewing, embroidery, and textile design. Through these avenues, she quietly promoted economic independence and dignity for women of lower classes, a stance not often taken by royalty of her era. Queen Victoria, though traditional in many ways, recognized Helena's dedication and allowed her daughter to pursue these interests, especially since they did not draw her away from her duties. But not everyone at court approved. Some thought it unseemly for a princess to concern herself with hospital work or public health. Still, Helena persisted, and in doing so laid the groundwork for a royal role that blended compassion, reform, and the careful dignity of a princess who believed that service meant more than ceremony. As Helena entered marriageable age, her future once again became a matter of dynastic strategy. Though she had fallen in love with her father's former librarian, Karl Ruland, the relationship was swiftly ended by Queen Victoria, who considered it inappropriate and beneath Helena's station. The episode was painful. Helena had shown real affection for Ruland, but he was dismissed from service and sent back to Germany. Personal feelings, once again, were pushed aside in favor of royal duty. The Queen, still in deep mourning for Prince Albert, was reluctant to lose Helena's presence at court. She insisted that any marriage must ensure Helena would remain close to home, preferably in Britain. This restriction significantly narrowed her choices. Potential matches were evaluated not only for noble blood, but also for their willingness to live near Windsor or Osborne, and to avoid distracting Helena from her duties to her mother. Eventually, Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, a minor German royal, was selected. He was kind, Protestant, and politically unobjectionable. But at nearly 15 years her senior and lacking wealth or power, the match was not universally welcomed. Many within the British press and public viewed him with skepticism, even scorn. Yet Helena accepted the proposal, not out of grand romance, but from a sense of obligation, loyalty, and perhaps the hope for a quieter, more independent life. The engagement revealed much about Helena's character. She did not rebel. She negotiated. She chose companionship and practicality over fantasy, embracing her role not as a fairy tale princess, but as a woman who knew how to live within the lines drawn for her. On the 5th of July in the year 1866, Princess Helena married Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein in the private chapel at Windsor Castle. The ceremony, though attended by family and courtiers, lacked the grandeur often expected of royal weddings. Queen Victoria, still mourning Prince Albert, wore black and overshadowed the occasion with her somber mood. It was a union shaped more by duty than celebration, and not everyone was pleased. Prince Christian's background became a point of controversy. His native region had recently been annexed by Prussia following the Schleswig-Holstein conflict, and the British public viewed him as a minor German noble with little to offer. Political critics questioned the wisdom of the match, especially during a time when anti-German sentiment simmered beneath the surface of British society. Even some members of the royal family found the pairing underwhelming, but Helena remained firm. She had chosen stability, not spectacle. Prince Christian, though without a grand title or fortune, was kind, respectful, and content to let Helena continue her public and family duties. They agreed to live in Britain, satisfying Queen Victoria's demand that her daughter stay nearby. The couple would later settle at Cumberland Lodge in Windsor Great Park, where they could enjoy relative privacy while remaining within reach of royal obligations. Helena's marriage may have disappointed those expecting grandeur, but it revealed her clarity of purpose. She sought a partner, not a throne, a role that allowed her to serve, to raise a family, and to remain close to her mother. In this quiet defiance of public opinion, Helena charted her own royal course, one guided by loyalty, practicality, and resilience. After their wedding, Princess Helena and Prince Christian began their married life at Frogmore House, near Windsor, before settling more permanently at Cumberland Lodge in Windsor Great Park. Their home, while stately, lacked the extravagant court life of London or Osborne. Instead, it became a haven for modest family life, one marked by comfort, consistency, and quiet devotion. Helena adapted quickly to her new role as the head of a small royal household. She managed domestic affairs with diligence and took pride in creating a space that balanced royal dignity with personal warmth. Prince Christian, older and less publicly involved, supported Helena's independent interests, especially her charitable work and devotion to the nursing profession. Their relationship, though never passionate by royal standards, was steady and mutually respectful. At Cumberland Lodge, the couple entertained sparingly, preferring the company of close friends and relatives. Helena's siblings often visited, and the home became a meeting place for members of Queen Victoria's sprawling family. Yet Helena never abandoned her duties. She remained an active correspondent for the Queen, continued attending official ceremonies, and represented the crown in various charitable institutions. Despite lingering criticism over her choice of husband, Helena had found balance. Her marriage gave her both stability and freedom, allowing her to serve the crown without sacrificing personal contentment. She was no longer just the dutiful daughter or overshadowed princess. In the House of Schleswig, she became something quieter, yet stronger, a royal woman who had carved out her own dignified corner in the vast expanse of the British monarchy. Between 1867 and 1872, Helena gave birth to 6 children, though only 5 survived infancy. Among them were Prince Christian Victor and Prince Albert, who would go on to serve in the British military and hold roles within the extended royal family. Her daughters, Princess Helena Victoria and Princess Marie Louise, never married but remained prominent figures in royal society, dedicating their lives to charity and public service. Through them, Helena's legacy of modest devotion would continue well into the 20th century. Despite her outward calm, Helena faced significant health challenges throughout her adult life. She suffered from episodes of physical weakness, neuralgia, and periods of intense fatigue that sometimes restricted her royal engagements. Doctors were often consulted, and at times, her conditions were misunderstood or downplayed as nerves or hysteria, common misdiagnoses for women of her era. Still, she refused to let illness define her. Helena balanced motherhood, charity work, and court responsibilities with quiet resolve. She raised her children with care, instilling in them values of service and restraint. While other branches of the royal family made headlines with scandal or spectacle, Helena's household remained steady, if understated. Her life was a study in equilibrium. She lived in the public eye but kept her family life private. She honored royal tradition while gently pushing social norms forward. And despite her health, she fulfilled her duties without complaint. In the balance between visibility and discretion, Helena found her place not at the center of royal power, but as its quiet, enduring foundation. Helena's most lasting public contribution came through her tireless advocacy for the nursing profession and women's roles in health care. At a time when nursing was still viewed by many as unsuitable for upper-class women, let alone royalty, Helena broke convention. In 1887, she became the founding president of the British Nurses Association, later granted the royal title under her guidance. Her mission was simple yet bold, to standardize nurse training and elevate the profession's status across Britain. Unlike other royals who lent their names to causes but remained at a distance, Helena was deeply involved. She presided over meetings, reviewed training programs, and personally corresponded with nurses, doctors, and hospital administrators. Her work helped pave the way for formal registration, a milestone in professionalizing nursing as both a skilled and honorable occupation. Helena also supported the Red Cross and Queen Victoria's Jubilee Institute for Nurses, further broadening access to community care, especially in underserved rural areas. Beyond health, she quietly encouraged women's education, promoted employment for widows and lower-class women through embroidery and textile cooperatives, and upheld the idea that service, not status, defined value. She was not a loud feminist by modern standards, but her actions spoke volumes. In her firm, practical way, Helena used her royal position to open doors that had long been closed. She didn't challenge the monarchy, she refined it, making room for compassion, discipline, and quiet progress. At a time when women's voices were often silenced, Helena's was clear, not through speeches, but through sustained, unwavering service to causes that truly mattered. Despite her many public roles, Helena remained politically cautious, a necessity in a royal family often divided by personal loyalties and European tensions. Her marriage to Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein had long stirred unease among her siblings, particularly the Prince of Wales, later King Edward VII. He never fully accepted Christian, viewing him as an outsider clinging to the court's inner circle without a legitimate power base of his own. This division created subtle, ongoing tension within the royal household. At family events, the atmosphere could grow strained. Helena, ever loyal to her husband, stood her ground, but she did so with restraint rather than confrontation. She rarely involved herself in debates or international politics, preferring to serve as a calming presence rather than a vocal advocate. Her political caution also extended to foreign affairs. As anti-German sentiment rose in Britain, particularly leading into the early 20th century, Helena was mindful of her German connections. While other royals downplayed their continental ties, she remained quietly respectful of her heritage, neither flaunting nor denying it. Her tact helped her maintain trust with the British public, even as other members of the monarchy faced scrutiny. In an age when royal families were often torn by politics and pride, Helena embodied steadiness. She chose unity over ambition, discretion over drama. Though she could not mend every family divide, she never allowed them to distract from her sense of duty to her country, her mother, and her own unwavering sense of right. As the years passed, Helena remained a vital, active member of the royal family, even as her siblings took on grander roles or receded from public view. Her royal duties often took her across the British Isles and occasionally into Europe, where she represented the crown at ceremonies, openings, and charitable events. Though she was never the center of political power, Helena's presence was always dignified, a symbol of constancy and commitment. She received numerous honors for her service, including the Royal Red Cross and the Royal Order of Victoria and Albert. These awards reflected her tireless efforts in nursing reform, philanthropy, and the quiet leadership she offered within the monarchy. Unlike more flamboyant royals, Helena wore her titles lightly, not as ornaments, but as tools for further service. Her later travels included hospital visits, military reviews, and appearances at women's health conferences. Whether opening a new ward or speaking at a nurse's graduation, she carried herself with warmth and clarity. Nurses often wrote of how approachable and engaged she was, not distant or ceremonial, but sincerely interested in their work and challenges. At home, she continued managing family affairs, supporting her husband's declining health, and serving as a point of contact for various charitable institutions. Even as she aged, Helena maintained a remarkable level of public engagement. Her devotion to causes, particularly those involving health, women, and service, never wavered. In a world changing swiftly around her, Princess Helena remained steadfast, a royal who proved that honor and humility could walk hand in hand. In the early years of the 20th century, Helena's life shifted once more with the steady decline of Prince Christian's health. By this time, their children were grown, and Helena had long settled into her dual role as a royal public servant and devoted family matriarch. Yet behind the calm exterior, the inevitability of loss loomed again. Prince Christian died on the 28th of October in the year 1921, after more than 5 decades of marriage. His death marked the end of an era for Helena. Though theirs had not been a grand love story, it had been a lasting one built on companionship, shared duty, and deep mutual respect. She mourned him in private, refusing grand displays of grief, but those close to her spoke of the emptiness his absence left behind. Her days at Cumberland Lodge grew quieter, more reflective. Following his death, Helena gradually withdrew from court life. She returned more frequently to London, taking residence at Skammerg House, a graceful townhouse along Pall Mall. There, she lived in dignity and modest comfort, far from the bustling ceremonies that now belonged to a younger generation of royals. Yet even in widowhood, Helena's sense of duty did not waver. She continued to support nursing organizations, correspond with charities, and attend select public events when her health allowed. With the passing of time, she became something of a living relic of Queen Victoria's age, one of the few remaining daughters of an empire that had once ruled half the globe. In her quiet apartment, she surrounded herself with family portraits, letters, and tokens of her lifelong service, a gentle reminder that though widowed, Helena remained a pillar of royal continuity and enduring grace. When the First World War erupted in the year 1914, Princess Helena, though nearly 70, did not retreat into quiet retirement. Instead, she renewed her commitment to public service with remarkable energy and clarity. As hospitals overflowed and families mourned, Helena returned to her roots as a nursing advocate, offering guidance and support to the organizations she had helped build decades earlier. She continued her presidency of the Royal British Nurses Association, helping to coordinate care, encourage standards, and boost morale among war-weary medical staff. She made visits to hospitals, met with Red Cross representatives, and sent personal letters of encouragement to nurses on the front lines. Though she no longer held the same influence as during her prime, her presence offered reassurance, a reminder of continuity and compassion in a world turned upside down. The war years were also marked by personal trials. Anti-German sentiment surged across Britain, and Helena's surname, Schleswig-Holstein, drew criticism, despite her lifelong loyalty to the United Kingdom. To avoid further scrutiny, official references to her husband's title were quietly dropped in public communications. Helena, ever practical, accepted the decision without protest. Her focus remained on helping others, not defending herself. Throughout the conflict, she maintained a steady presence in London, balancing quiet patriotism with hands-on involvement. She rarely spoke to the press, but those who worked with her described her as calm, composed, and unwavering. In a time of bombs and heartbreak, Princess Helena became a quiet source of hope, not through speeches or medals, but through the consistent, humble work of a woman who had spent her life putting service before self. In her final years, Princess Helena lived a quieter life at Skammerg House in London. The grand halls and sweeping estates of her youth were now distant memories, replaced by a graceful townhouse filled with books, photographs, and the slow rhythm of routine. From this modest setting, she remained a link to the Victorian era, the living daughter of Queen Victoria, a steady reminder of a time when duty shaped every corner of royal life. Though age and illness had slowed her movements, Helena's mind remained sharp. She read widely, corresponded with her children and charities, and kept close watch on royal news and public affairs. When visitors came, they were welcomed with warmth and quiet formality. To those who knew her well, she remained as she had always been, practical, loyal, and deeply kind. Her daughters, Princess Helena Victoria and Princess Marie Louise, were often by her side. Neither had married, and both had taken up causes close to their mother's heart, especially in healthcare, housing, and women's support services. The three women formed a tight-knit circle, their lives marked not by grandeur but by purpose. At Skammerg House, Helena was no longer a princess of courtly influence, but a woman of reflection, memory, and quiet pride. She had lived through the reigns of multiple monarchs, 2 wars, and a changing empire, and yet her values never shifted. In simplicity, she found strength. In service, she found peace. And in the stillness of her final home, she prepared with grace for the farewell history would one day record. On the 9th of June in the year 1923, Princess Helena passed away at Skammerg House, London, at the age of 77. After a long illness, her death closed the final chapter of a royal life defined by quiet service and enduring duty. She was the third of Queen Victoria's 9 children to die, and one of the last living links to Britain's Victorian age. She was laid to rest at Frogmore, near Windsor, beside her husband, Prince Christian. The funeral, though modest, was attended by dignitaries, family, and members of the nursing organizations she had supported. Wreaths arrived from across the country, and nurses paused to honor the woman who had stood by their side. Though never a monarch or political force, Helena left behind a legacy of constancy. She supported her mother, raised her children with care, served the sick, and held firm to values of compassion and duty. She witnessed shifting empires, world wars, and the changing role of women, yet her voice remained steady. At Skammerg House and in the hearts of those she touched, Helena was more than a princess. She was a quiet bridge builder, a defender of humble service, and proof that history's greatest strength is not always loud but deeply graceful. What do you think about Maria Josepha of Saxony? Was Maria Josepha a graceful and devoted Dauphine, a woman of deep faith, quiet strength, and unwavering loyalty who brought dignity to Versailles in its most glittering age? Or was she a forgotten thread in France's royal tapestry, overshadowed by loss, illness, and a court that seldom cherished her quiet soul? And what about Princess Helena of the United Kingdom? Was Helena a pillar of royal compassion, a daughter of empire who turned duty into service, nursing into reform, and motherhood into legacy? Or was she a hidden figure, eclipsed by louder royals, remembered more for her obedience than her voice, her quiet grace than her rightful influence? Were these women soft echoes in royal corridors, or the silent architects of royal strength? Did their restraint hold kingdoms together, or did history silence their truth beneath layers of pageantry and protocol? In every palace, behind every crown, lives a story untold, a legacy carried not in titles, but in choices made quietly, steadfastly, and with purpose. Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales from the past. Stories of courage, choice, and the quiet force behind history. Thank you so much for watching.